The Last Hope's Gambit, a desperate mission to save humanity. Chapter 1. The Betrayal. The space was silent and still. All was calm on the Heisenberg, the largest spaceship in the Intergalactic Alliance fleet. Captain Jameson Clark stood by the main bridge, his hand hovering over the buttons of his console. Beside him, his trusted first officer, Commander Serena Ramirez, stood with a scowl on her face. "You look like you've got a bad feeling about this, Serena," Jameson said, his voice low. "I do, sir," Serena replied. "We've been on this mission too long. Something's not right." Jameson frowned, but before he could reply, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. The crew sprang into action, rushing to their stations and frantically typing at consoles. "Captain, we're under attack," one of the crew shouted. Jameson's heart pounded in his chest as he surveyed the situation on his console. Several ships were descending upon them, their weapons firing with deadly accuracy. "Shields up!" Jameson barked. "Get us out of range." The Heisenberg shuddered as it took several direct hits. Jameson gripped the console tightly, sweat beading on his forehead. "Damage report," he shouted. "Internal systems failing," came the response. "We're losing power." Jameson cursed under his breath. He knew they were in deep trouble. But how had they been caught off guard like this? Suddenly, a piercing alarm sounded throughout the ship. Jameson glanced at his console and felt his blood run cold. "We've been boarded," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Serena's eyes widened in horror. "By who? How?" Before Jameson could answer, the door to the bridge burst open. A group of armed figures stormed in, their weapons trained on the crew. "Everyone, hands up!" one of them barked. Jameson and Serena raised their hands slowly, their eyes flickering with fear. Jameson could hardly believe what was happening. They had been betrayed by someone within their own ranks. "Who are you?" Jameson demanded. The figure stepped forward, a wicked grin on his face. "I'm your worst nightmare, Captain Clark. And you're going to wish you never crossed me." Chapter 2. The alien encounter. Jameson felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. The betrayal had been bad enough, but now they were in the clutches of unknown assailants. Were they aliens? Pirates? He had no idea. "Who are you?" Jameson repeated, his voice shaking slightly. The figure chuckled. "I am Vaxxer, warrior of the planet Xerxes. And you and your crew are now our prisoners." Jameson's eyes widened. Xerxes was a planet known for its aggressive and violent inhabitants. He knew they were in trouble. "What do you want from us?" Serena spoke up. Vaxxer sneered. "As if you don't know. Your ship is one of the most advanced in the galaxy. We want its technology for ourselves." Jameson gritted his teeth. He couldn't let them get their hands on the Heisenberg's technology. But with their systems failing and their shields down, it seemed like they had little choice. Suddenly, the ship jolted and Jameson felt his stomach lurch. What was that? Vaxxer's face twisted into a snarl. "You are not alone out here. Another ship approaches." Jameson's heart sank. Another unknown party? This was turning into a nightmare. "Can't we just negotiate with these aliens?" one of the crew members spoke up. Maybe we can form an alliance and fight off Voxar's forces together? Jameson shook his head. It's not that simple. We don't know these aliens, and we can't just trust that they'll have our best interests at heart. He glanced at his console and saw that the other ship was rapidly approaching. They would arrive in less than 5 minutes. Okay, we need a plan, Jameson said, his mind racing. We need to gain control of our ship and get the hell out of here. But how? Serena asked. Jameson looked around at his crew. We'll split up. Some of us will distract Vaxar and his forces while the others try to regain control of the ship. We have to act fast before it's too late. The crew sprang into action, dividing themselves into 2 teams. Jameson led the distraction team, while Serena headed up the effort to regain control of the ship. As they engaged Voxar's forces in battle, Jameson couldn't help but wonder what the other ship held in store for them. Were they friend or foe? He could only hope that they would arrive in time to lend a helping hand. Chapter 3. The broken system. Serena ran down the hallway, her heart racing. She had never felt so powerless before. The ship was a mess, and their systems were failing rapidly. She reached the engine room and found her team huddled together, frantically trying to diagnose the problem. The room was hot and stuffy, but no one was complaining. They knew how important this was. What's the damage? Serena asked. One of the engineers turned to her, his face lined with worry. It's bad, Commander. We've sustained significant damage to our engines and our power systems. We're lucky to still be flying. Serena gritted her teeth. She knew they were in trouble, and time was running out. They needed to get their systems back online, or they'd be dead in the water. Okay, let's get to work, she said, grabbing a toolkit and starting to assess the damage. As they worked, they could hear the sounds of battle outside. Jameson and his team were holding Voxar's forces at bay, but Serena had no idea how much longer they could last. They needed to get back in the fight soon, but they couldn't do that if their ship was falling apart. Several hours passed, and Serena's team was getting restless. They had tried everything they could think of to fix the engines, but nothing was working. Serena felt a sense of despair creeping in. Was this it? Were they all going to die here in deep space, with no hope of rescue? But then, something clicked. Serena noticed a pattern in their power surges that they hadn't seen before. It was almost like something was interfering with their systems. Guys, take a look at this, she said, motioning to the screen. I think we've found our problem. Her team leaned in, their eyes widening as they saw what she was talking about. That's not natural, one of them said. Serena nodded. No, it's not. Someone's been messing with our systems. She didn't know how it was possible, but the evidence was right in front of them. They had been sabotaged. And they needed to fix it fast, before it was too late. As they worked to repair the damage, Serena's mind raced. Who had done this? And why? They had already been betrayed once. Was there another traitor in their midst? She could only hope that Jameson and his team could hold off Voxar's forces long enough for them to get their ship back online. The stakes had never been higher. Chapter 4. The codebreaker. Jameson's team battled valiantly against Voxar's forces. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they refused to give up without a fight. As the sound of weapons fire echoed through the corridors, Jameson found his mind wandering. Who was attacking them? And why did they want the Heisenberg's technology? The more he thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. Suddenly, he was hit by a blinding pain. He gasped and fell to the ground, clutching his head. "Captain!" Serena's voice echoed in his earpiece. "Are you all right?" Jameson forced himself to stand. "Yeah, I'm okay. But something's not right. They're using some kind of weapon to mess with our minds." Serena cursed under her breath. "Then we need to take them down fast, before they can do any more damage." As they fought, Jameson noticed that Vaxer seemed to be communicating with someone on his wrist. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but it was clear that they were getting orders from someone else. Jameson knew what he had to do. He rallied his team and formulated a plan. "We need to capture Vaxer and interrogate him," he said. "We need to find out who he's working for and what their endgame is." His team nodded in agreement, and they set their sights on Vaxer. But he was a formidable foe, and they struggled to subdue him. Just when all hope seemed lost, a figure appeared at the end of the corridor. Jameson squinted, trying to make out who it was. It was a woman. She was small and wiry, with short cropped hair and a determined look on her face. She raised a hand and made a motion, and suddenly Vaxer flew backwards, slamming into the wall with a sickening thud. Jameson's team rushed forward, cuffing Vaxer and restraining him. The woman approached, her gaze steady. "I've been tracking these guys for a while," she said. "My name's Trix. I'm a codebreaker." Jameson raised an eyebrow. "A codebreaker? What do you mean?" Trix grinned. "I mean I can get into any system, crack any code. And I think I know who's behind this attack." Jameson felt a surge of hope. Maybe they weren't alone after all. Maybe they could fight back against their attackers and come out on top. "Okay, Trix," he said. "Let's hear what you've got." Chapter 5. The Race Against Time. Trix led Jameson and Serena to the Heisenberg's computer room. As they entered, she wasted no time getting to work. She sat down at a console and began furiously typing. Jameson and Serena watched in awe as code scrolled past, gibberish to their untrained eyes. After several tense minutes, Trix spoke up, her voice tinged with excitement. "I found something. It's a transmission from the Oracle." Jameson and Serena exchanged a glance. The Oracle was a notorious organization known for their cutthroat tactics and disregard for life. "What do they want?" Serena asked. Trix scrolled through the transmission, her face growing taut. "They want the Heisenberg's technology. They say they'll stop at nothing to get it." Jameson shook his head. "They have no idea what they're dealing with. We can't let them get their hands on our ship." Trix nodded. "I can track the source of the transmission, but we don't have much time. They're moving quickly, and they have resources we can only dream of." Jameson clenched his fists. "We have to try. We can't just sit here and wait for them to come to us." They sprang into action, racing against the clock to track down the source of the transmission. Every second felt like an eternity as they worked, sweat pouring down their faces. Finally, Trix gasped. "I've found it. They're based on a planet called Siren. It's a dangerous place, No one goes there unless they have to. Jameson nodded. Then that's where we're going. Get us there as fast as you can. As they blasted off towards Siren, Jameson couldn't help but feel a sense of doom settling in his stomach. They were headed straight into the enemy's territory, with no backup and no guarantees. But he refused to let fear take hold. He was the captain of the Heisenberg, and it was his duty to protect his crew and their technology, whatever the cost. They landed on Siren under the cover of darkness, Trix leading the way. It was a hostile place, with dangerous animals lurking in the shadows and a permanent haze covering the landscape. Jameson and his team fought their way through the planet's defenses, their weapons clutched tightly in their hands. Every second felt like an eternity as they made their way closer to the Oracle's base. Finally, they arrived. The base was heavily fortified, with guards patrolling the perimeter and guns at the ready. Without hesitation, Jameson and his team attacked. It was a brutal fight, with every moment feeling like a race against time. Jameson could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he fought, his mind focused on one thing: keeping his crew and their technology safe. Finally, they emerged victorious. The Oracle's base was in shambles, with the enemy forces scattered and defeated. Jameson let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. We did it. We won. But the victory was bittersweet. Jameson knew that danger was still out there, waiting for them. They couldn't let their guard down even for a moment. As they boarded the Heisenberg and flew off into the depths of space, Jameson couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. They were in for a long fight, and the stakes had never been higher. Chapter 6. The final battle. Jameson and his crew had been in a state of constant motion ever since they left Siren. They bounced from planet to planet, trying to stay one step ahead of their attackers. But every time they thought they were safe, they were hit by another attack. They were constantly on the defensive, and Jameson knew that it was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed. Finally, the day arrived. Voxar's forces descended on them, their ships glowing with a malevolent energy. Jameson's team was battle-weary, but they refused to give up. As the ships clashed in the depths of space, Jameson felt his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. The final battle. They fought like demons, dodging and weaving through enemy fire. But the enemy was relentless, and Jameson knew that it would take everything they had to win. Suddenly, a blinding light filled the cockpit. Jameson gritted his teeth, banging on the console as he tried to regain control of the Heisenberg. When he opened his eyes, he found himself lying on the floor of the cockpit. The ship was tumbling out of control, and he could hear alarms blaring in the background. "Captain!" Serena's voice crackled over the radio. "Are you all right?" Jameson groaned, feeling a pain in his side. I'm okay. What happened?" Serena's voice was strained. "We took a direct hit. We're losing power fast." Jameson knew what he had to do. He dragged himself to the controls, typing in commands with shaking hands. But it was no use. The ship was failing, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. "We're going down," Jameson said, his voice hollow. Serena's voice was steady. "Then we go down fighting. We'll take as many of them with us as we can." Jameson nodded grimly. There was no time left for fear, no time left for doubt. They had to fight, to survive, to protect their ship and everything it stood for. The Heisenberg burst through the atmosphere and hit the ground with a bone-jarring crunch. Jameson's team stumbled out of the ship, weapons at the ready. They were outnumbered, but they refused to give up. They fought with everything they had, determination etched into their faces. Finally, the enemy was defeated. Jameson looked around, panting for breath. The Heisenberg was in ruins, but they had won. A single figure emerged from the wreckage, his eyes cold and calculating. "You may have won this battle," he snarled. "But the war is far from over." Jameson raised his weapon, feeling a sense of satisfaction as he pulled the trigger. "Not as long as we're still breathing," he replied. "Not as long as we have the Heisenberg." As he looked out over the charred, barren landscape, Jameson knew that there were more battles to come. But he was ready for them. He was the captain of the Heisenberg, and he would do whatever it took to protect his crew and their technology, no matter the cost. Chapter 7. The Last Hope's Gambit. Jameson and his crew had won the final battle against Voxar's forces, but their victory had come at a great cost. The Heisenberg was in ruins, and they were stranded on a barren planet with no hope of rescue. Jameson sat in his makeshift command center, his gaze fixed on the wreckage of his ship. He knew that they were a long way from safety, but he refused to give up. Suddenly, Trix burst into the room. "I've found something," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. Jameson raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Trix grinned. "It's a transmission. From a group of rebels who are fighting back against the Oracle. They say they have a plan to take them down, and they need our help." Jameson felt a spark of hope flicker to life inside him. Maybe there was a way out of this after all. "Okay," he said. "Get me their frequency. We'll see what they have to say." As Trix tapped away at her console, Jameson felt his mind racing. They were in a desperate situation, but if they could work with these rebels, they might just have a chance. Finally, the transmission came through. A woman's face appeared on the screen, her eyes steady. "My name is Kayla," she said. "I represent the Last Hope. We're a group of rebels fighting against the Oracle. We think we have a way to take them down, but we need your help." Jameson leaned forward, his heart pounding. "What do you need?" Kayla's voice was flat. "We need the Heisenberg's weapon technology. With that, we can hit the Oracle where it hurts and put an end to their tyranny once and for all." Jameson hesitated. He knew that the Heisenberg's technology was powerful, perhaps too powerful for anyone to wield. But they were stranded, with no hope of rescue. They were a long way from safety, and the Oracle would never stop hunting them. In the end, it came down to a simple choice. Fight or die. "Okay," Jameson said. "We'll help you. But it's going to take everything we've got." Kayla's face softened. "I know. But it's the only hope we have. Will you come and meet us?" Jameson stood, his gaze fixed on the wreckage of his ship. "We'll be there. Just give us a few hours to get ready." As they set out towards the rebel base, Jameson felt a sense of trepidation growing within him. He didn't know if they could trust these rebels, or if their plan would work. But they didn't have a choice. They were the Last Hope's Gambit, and they had to play their cards right if they wanted to win. As they arrived at the rebel base, Jameson's team was greeted with cheers and applause. Kayla approached him, her eyes shining. "Welcome to the Last Hope," she said. "We've been waiting for you." Over the next few hours, Jameson and his crew worked with the rebels, planning and preparing for the final showdown. It was a desperate plan, one that relied on their mastery of the Heisenberg's powerful weapons technology. But they were determined to see it through to the end. They had come too far to give up now. Finally, the day arrived. The rebels launched a massive assault on the Oracle, their ships glowing with a fierce energy. Jameson and his team stayed back, waiting for the right moment. And then, they struck. The Heisenberg's weapons tore through the Oracle's ships like they were made of paper. Jameson felt a sense of grim satisfaction as he watched his enemy fall. But it wasn't over yet. They had to get to the Oracle's base, to take out their leader and put an end to their reign of terror. It was a desperate fight, with Jameson and his team pushing themselves to the limit. But in the end, they emerged victorious. As they boarded the Heisenberg and blasted off into the depths of space, Jameson couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. They had done it. They had won. But the victory was bittersweet. They had lost so much along the way: their ship, their friends, their way of life. As they flew off into the unknown, Jameson knew that their journey was far from over. But he was ready for it. He was the captain of the Heisenberg, and he would do whatever it took to protect his crew and their technology, no matter the cost. Because hope was all they had left, and they would cling to it with everything they had.